want the world to know about the capacity of Muslims to transcend identity conflicts.
Right. Well,
and what do we have to do to help you?
Well, Mr. President, it's not a one-off thing, so you just don't do the Amman message and stop there. You have to work at it every single day, and whenever something comes up, you've got to nip it in the bud. So this time last year, you could see inside of Islam, clerics on the Shia side or the Sunni side of the divide trying to create animosities or hate, basically because of the Syria conflict. So immediately we got clerics in a conference to Jordan, inter-Islamic, to come out and say, what's happening in Syria has got nothing to do with Islam, because you have to nip it in the bud right away. And actually, the most moving part of that conference was at the lunch when two Iraqis stood up, one that was two religious figures, one Shia, one Iraqi, and they both held each other's hands and said, listen, we're both Iraqis, he's Shia, I'm Sunni. What's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq has got nothing to do with religion. 2 weeks later, we had another conference about Christian Arabs, because unfortunately these extremists are using ammunition to try and create so much hatred. Again, you have to step out there the minute these things happen to say what is happening is wrong, and you have to show leadership. So the conference we had about Christians was to bring all the Arab Christian communities and leadership and Christian leadership from outside the world to say, listen, fact is fact. Arab Christians have been part of our past, they're part of our present, and they will continue to be part of our future. They have been the building block of the Middle East for 2,000 years, and that's something to be proud of. And so whenever these things happen, you've got to nip it in the bud. But at the same time, I think there's three ways, if you will allow me to challenge these issues. So one of them is, this is how the extremists use the challenges. One of them is perceived injustices. And sometimes I know I'll get flack for this from certain circles, but a perceived injustice or an injustice by many people is the Palestinian right of existence or their future and that of Jerusalem. And I know that some of our Israeli colleagues, every time I say that all roads lead to Jerusalem, get upset at this, and you and I have heard this issue for a long time. But rightly or wrongly, extremists use the injustice of the Palestinians and the issue of Jerusalem as a recruiting for extremists. And if you saw the tragedy of what happened in Gaza this summer, there's a direct correlation to the amount of foreign fighters that joined ISIS or have been recruited to Syria over the summer because of the propaganda that these groups use. So you can't say that this is not something that you can ignore. So on a separate issue, we're here in New York trying to see, can we get both partners back together again? Because the minute you ignore it, the minute that the Israelis and Palestinians walked away from the negotiating table, we in Jordan said, okay, let's start the stopwatch, because we knew exactly what was going to happen. And it's not by accident that the military field hospital we have in Gaza, from Gaza 1, we kept there, because we know Gaza 2, 3, 4, and if we don't solve this problem, Gaza 5, 6, and 7 will happen. So that is a problem that is emotional in the Arab and Islamic world that we have to deal with. In Iraq, we want to bring the Sunnis back into the fold so that they feel that they have a future in Iraq, and Jordan is in the best position to do that. That is a perceived injustice also. If we don't solve the issue of Syria and eventually tackle refugees, that's going to be a bubbling point. And as I said earlier on, there are other flashpoints around the Middle East that we have to look at comprehensively. The second part is combat ignorance. Ignorance because these groups around the world come out and say, in the name of Islam, this is what we stand for. They have nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. We and a lot of religious scholars are fighting back, but it's still at the high level. The extremist ISIL, for example, or ISIS, is using a new medium. They're very popular on Facebook, the internet. So how do we develop to be able to fight them at that level? But at the same time, we also want our Western friends to also push back against Islamophobia, which is actually fueling the propaganda that these extremists want to use in the Muslim sphere to say, look, these people hate us. So it goes both ways. And then the last thing I'll add very quickly is, how do you give hope to the younger generation? As I mentioned, there's a lot of young people looking for jobs, as they are in America, that just want to make their lives better. And how do we sit there and give the future of the Middle East and the youth, the largest youth cohort in history, actually, 25 million young people coming into the workplace over the next 10 years, an opportunity for a better life. This is something that we have to tackle. And then again, sir, I want to thank you, because what CGI has all been about over the past 10 years, from my point of view, is not the short-term fix. I think the word resilience is, I think, what you stand for, and what we're trying to stand for is fix the problems on the long term. And I just wanted to thank you and your organization for standing behind Jordan. I mean, we sometimes get very frustrated that, we will always do the right thing, and I think people take us for granted that we will always punch above our weight. And again, Syria and Iraq are not going to go away in the near future. This is going to be something that we're going to have to live with for the next 2 or 3 years. There'll be added requests of Jordan. We will continue to stand up at the plate. I know that you know that, and you're trying to do the best that you can. What we're asking everybody there is, please help us be there for all of you. And again, I'm so appreciative of everything that you've done to get us.
Let's give him a hand. Thank you.